In a world that's loud, the church does not have to remain silent. In a world that's dark, the church can shine God's light. Welcome to Light Talks, where we dive deep into real conversations, not just echoing the world's noise, but shedding God's light on challenging topics. Let's talk. Welcome back to another episode of Light Talks. I'm your host, Jonathan. Thanks for being here today as we talk about the issues and the things that are important to you. Today, we have on Light Talks a new guest. Nate Paul is joining us for a talk. Welcome, Nate. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. First time.
Yeah, there's a first time for everything. And thanks for fitting this into your busy schedule, which is kind of what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. We're going to focus today our conversation probably a little bit more geared towards the men out there. But it applies to everybody. I think maybe men struggle with some of the things we're going to talk about more. But we're bringing you on because you are a guy who wears a lot of hats. And that's kind of what we want to talk about, is juggling all the hats that we have. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, glad to. Thanks for having me. I feel like I've made it. My college baseball coach told me at one point that I had a face for radio. So, Bob, if you're out there watching this, I'm here, man. I did it.
Face for radio. That's fantastic. Well, this is being videoed, so the face is getting out there as well. So watch out.
Right. A little bit about me. I'm privileged to serve on staff at Ministries. And I handle the administrative stuff and get to lead those different areas kind of behind the scenes in our ministry. I've got 4 kids, married to my wife, Brianna, and we've been married for 12 years. And I think we run the best circus in town with our 4 young ones. So, yeah, wear a lot of hats, and it's a topic that I'm so passionate about. And you kind of alluded to it. Like, if you listen to my bio about my job, my kids, I serve on multiple boards, I coach multiple sports. You probably should be telling me, we should go find somebody else to talk about this topic. If my wife is listening, and she will, she'll be like, yeah, this is a good thing for you to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I feel like so often these are things that I get out of whack. And you look at, what my identity is, the callings that I have, and they're all good. But so often I feel at the end of the day that the space gets crowded. And I feel like I'm not the father that I wanted to be that day, or I didn't love my wife like I should have that day, or you got to the end of the day and did I spend time in God's word? And it's this stuff just fills up, and they're good things and things that I love being a part of. But again, too often I feel like it just gets out of whack. And so recently I had an opportunity to speak at a conference just on who we are, what God calls us to be, and why so often I feel like, again, it's just out of whack.
Yeah. And part of it, we've talked about this on past episodes too, the busyness culture. Mm-hmm. We live in a culture that celebrates busyness, celebrates status, celebrates all these things, and it's so easy to just get those things just consume us in so many different ways. So, where do we start? Help us, all of us who are too busy, whose life is out of balance. Where do we start? How do we reevaluate everything? How do we get things back into a good balance?
Yeah.
Where do you want to start?
Yeah, it's, for me, as I started to explore this topic and really take inventory of my own life, I wanted to just understand the what and the why.
Okay.
What do I feel? What does my family feel? What does life look like? And why? How did I get there? And so, if anybody out there listening is like me, you try to work hard during the day and you get home and you're a little bit tired and the kids got to eat, and, my wife is home and she's chasing little ones and she's tired, and so there's homework and there's dinner, and, oh, by the way, we got practice tonight and I coach, so I got to get to practice. And, oh yeah, I said yes to do this podcast and I better study my notes for this, and there's a professional development class that I'm taking and I still have homework for that, and it's like,
does this sound familiar? Yeah.
And that's kind of what life looks like. And nowhere in that description of my day did I talk about where was my time for God today?
Yeah.
What time did I allocate to dating my wife, loving my wife? Because these things, these good things, inherently good things, they grow and they start to crowd out other things. And so I just started to unpack why? Like, how do we get there? Like, and I think first it starts with kind of, I have to understand myself. If you ever done Strengths Finder,
Yep.
I have arranger, responsibility, and belief that are my top 3. And so I like to get things done. I like to be busy. I like to move the needle. And I believe that, checking those boxes is a good thing. Like, do what you say you're going to do. I don't like letting people down. And so you say yes to these things. And again, they start to crowd out the other things in your life that you want to be priority. Mm-hmm. And I did a little research on this topic, and there's this Attune, they're a research organization, and they have all this data out there that shows, like, specifically for men, like what do we seek in life, like what are the goals that we try to achieve, and the 2 things that bubble at the top are financial security and competition.
Competition, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes sense with especially sports. And we love sports, and we love to participate in our kids' sports activities and stuff too. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and I think how that plays out in our life. And there's another study, Harvard Business Review looked at one on the comparison of men and their goals in life compared to women and their goals in their lives. And what they found is that men are driven more so than our better halves by power-related goals.
Yeah.
Because our better halves understand the trade-offs that exist. And, I look at my own life and I have the blinders on. I don't necessarily see those things or realize those things like I should. And so as you start to unpack this, I start to look at, like, well, this is how my heart is driving me. My heart seeks these things. My heart seeks achievement and success. And so I'm wired that way. I'm tempted that way. And then you look at our world and what we see each day on social media, on commercials, and who are the people that go viral, who have the massive followings. It's power, it's money, it's things, it's success. And so, like, our world drives us, that feeds into our hearts that direction. And so, left unfiltered, left unchecked, like, that's where we're going to go. And I think that's why, like, I know so often I feel like I get to that space of I've got so many things going on, but yet are they the right things? Are they in order in my life?
So the first step really sounds like some honest self-evaluation for especially for us guys. Like, where are we? Take the blinders off. What's driving us?
Yep.
Where am I going? And why do I want to go there? I wonder if how many guys out there really have sat down honestly and thought, what is driving me? And maybe some people have their goals all mapped out, or that are really I'm thinking as you're talking, like, what drives me? Which one of those things drives? I don't know how deeply I've thought about that. Mm-hmm. So
and I think too often we only do that when life gets really, really busy and full, and all of a sudden we're at this breaking point of either, I'm not in a good place physically, emotionally, spiritually, or my relationships aren't, with my wife, with my kids. And so we get to this place and we're like, well, how did we get here? Because, in the moment, we don't stop to kind of pause and think about what that investment is going to be. How much time is that going to take from me? And so, I know the way I'm wired, and I'm like, oh, yeah, you want to coach? Yeah, let's do it. Oh, you got that speaking engagement? Yeah, let's do it.
Absolutely.
Oh, you want to serve on this board? Like, it's all good stuff. And it's stuff that I'm passionate about. And I think that's what we wrestle with, is these are good things. But then how do we make sure that those good things don't take away from the gifts that God has given us in our life?
Yeah, it made me think of Pastor Mike, what he said recently, which I'm sure we're going to get to, is first we break everything apart, now we got to put it all back together. But he said one of his rules is he doesn't say yes right away. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that might be part of what we're going to talk about. But,
oh yeah, he hit me right in the middle of the forehead with that.
I know. Yeah, which. Yeah, I guess just hearing you talk, it helps me do some self-assessment as well. I have a pet peeve, and it's busyness. I hate it when we're so busy. Yet, I don't know how to get out of it. I feel like that's the tension that is constantly in my life. Part of it, I think, is working for a church. I've been working in music, so we have the week, regular work week, school week for the kids. Church is on the weekends. And weeknights usually have rehearsals or other things, church groups related. It's like, it's full. it's full, and even working in the church, it's full of all good things, all the good things we're supposed to be doing. But then I feel like we have not had any space to breathe. So I feel this tension that we're talking about right now. So what do we do? We've got to do a self-assessment, first of all, probably, to what are we involved in and what do we do? How do we put this back together?
Yeah. I think as I kind of frame this up in my own life, like we just talked about, I think it's so important to understand, like, how do we get here? Like, why are we wired to that? Like, what is the trap that we fall into and why, from our heart perspective, from a worldly perspective? But as you start to dig into God's word, I just am always blown away at the practicality of it. God didn't just give us this beautiful gift as something that it shows us Jesus. We get to see God and his heart and his mission to save us from our sins. But there's so much beauty in that too that just applies to my daily life. Like, as I unpack this, I looked at the example of King Solomon. And like, he was a dude. Like, I mean, maybe the dude of all dudes. Like, this guy, he had everything. Yeah. Maybe the wisest, the richest, the most powerful man that ever lived. Yeah. And yet his heart was still seeking something more. And so he went on this massive exploration, research project to like dive into like, there's got to be more. And so what did he do? He sought after all the things that the world had to offer. So he went and he dove in. I'm going to seek wisdom and I'm going to learn everything I possibly can. And then he was seeking pleasure. And so he had harems and music and parties and all these things. And then he sought projects and work and toil and advancement. And he looked at all these things that the world has to offer. And what conclusion did he come to?
It's all meaningless.
It's all meaningless.
That's the book of Ecclesiastes, right?
Bingo.
That's where it all is, yeah. Yep.
Meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. And so, like, we have this beautiful example in the Bible of this guy, like the guy that I think from a worldly perspective, if we would look at, we'd be like, that dude's got it all. Like, he had it all. Like, and yet his heart was still striving for something. The same things like my heart is striving for. But yet I still try to seek those things. And again, the practicality of the Bible, like, it's so amazing. Like, King Solomon goes on this amazing exploration to try and find, his identity in this world. And what conclusion did he come to? Ecclesiastes chapter 12 tells us, I just love how straightforward this is. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Stamp, period.
Done.
Like, done.
End podcast episode. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah.
And it's just amazing how practical that is. Yeah. And yet, like, I fall into that trap of seeking these things. And I seek my identity in my job or in my kids or in my accomplishments or the way in which I serve. And again, these are all good and godly things. But we have to unpack what God says, because if we continually seek our identity in those things, like, we're going to get to the same conclusion that Solomon has.
Yeah. So that sounds like Solomon's laying out our starting point. God needs to be at the center of our lives, starting to build everything else around that. So what does that look like? I know we've talked in previous episodes here about marriage and about men stepping up with devotional lives with their spouses, things like that. But maybe it's what are we doing personally with our walk with God in our study of His Scripture ourselves as men? Maybe that's where we got to start. I don't know. Give us your wisdom. Give us your wisdom.
I don't have the wisdom. Again, I'm going to go to the Bible because, again, like, just the practicality as you start to unpack it. And this is, I'm kind of walking through, like, my exploration of, like, when my life feels out of whack. What have I done to unpack that, and where did I go, and where did I try to find the right path?
Sure.
And so then you've got this example of Jesus. And, like, again, Jesus, the beauty of this is he faced all the same temptations we face. He was a dude. Like, he was tempted. I mean, how did the devil literally tempt him? It's like, Jesus, look at all this. It couldn't all be yours. Like, he tempted him with the same things that my heart says, like, I want to pursue. Achievement, success, power. Like, the devil's not dumb. He didn't tempt him with things that Jesus was going to be like, oh, yeah, I don't need that. Like, he tempted him because he knew, like, these are things that men are wired to want. And so, like, Jesus gives us this beautiful picture in Matthew 6 of, like, these things are going to fail you. What should you pursue? And he talks about treasures in heaven. and seeking and storing up treasures in heaven in Matthew 6. And why does he tell us that? Because, again, he knows our hearts worry about money and where it's going to come from and power. And so it tells us, he says, do not worry. The birds chase after these things, but we don't have to worry about those things. So Jesus tells us, like, seek first his kingdom. And so as you start to understand, like, what God says about what we should seek first, and then the next step of that is you truly have to understand, in my opinion, and, like, I get goosebumps thinking about this, but, like, our identity in Christ is just the most beautiful thing you can ever imagine. Like, again, the world and my heart take me to, like, my identity being how successful I am and the money I can make and the accomplishments or whatever it is, or my kids winning the championship and, like, all those things. And again, they're good. But yet, until you know, like, what God thinks of you, you're going to consistently seek those things of this world. And, you know, I just rattled off these Bible verses, and, like, when you grasp, like, what God thinks of you, like, you start to see your identity and the power that it brings. And, you know, 1 John 3 tells us that, you know, the Father has lavished his love on us. He calls us children. 2 Corinthians 5, we're a new creation. The old is gone. Ephesians 1, he chose us before the creation of the world, holy and blameless. 1 Peter 2, I love this, a chosen people, royal priesthood, holy nation. We're his special possession. Like, you talk about, like, the power and achievements and success we seek. Like, he calls us a royal priesthood. Like, I hear those words and I'm like, again, the things that I'm seeking, that my heart is seeking, like, God's already given it to me. Like Zephaniah, he's the mighty warrior that saves. He takes great delight. So, you know, I could go on and on, but, like, the beauty of these verses tell me, like, all these things that the world is trying to tell me, that my heart is trying to tell me, what will fail, but yet look at what God thinks of me.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the passage when you were talking about how the heaven, you said the treasures in heaven, how heaven is often described as an inheritance, and we are sons and daughters of the King. So we're princes and princesses, and we inherit the King. Talk about possessions. Talk about power. The King of heaven says, this is all yours. What more could we ever want? So maybe I like to sometimes be practical too in my own thinking. It sounds like, first of all, that relationship with God, especially as men, walking as a prince of the King, knowing that our inheritance is secure, that's got to be our starting point when we start diving into our own lives and where our time is invested, what we're really truly seeking after. If we start with that at the beginning, you know, maybe that probably would help place everything around it appropriately, and because everything else is a gift from God when we already have all that we could ever need in Jesus and in heaven. Everything else is just a gift he's given us.
It's just amazing how that just reshapes your thinking when you understand that the things you're trying to achieve have already been given to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's a free gift. Like, again, the identity we have because of Jesus, like, that I don't have to work to achieve it.
Yeah.
That perfection that I want, like, I don't have to earn it. That's just a free gift. And when you put that at the center of your life, like, I frame it up in my mind of, like, a hub and spoke type model of, like, when you put God at the center, you know, you can't really, there is priority in seasons of things, but, like, all these things are good. Like, you know, you have God at the center, and you have your wife, you have your kids, you have all this other stuff, that the way in which you serve, your job, and they're all good and they're all needed. Like, God doesn't call me to be a horrible employee and just invest all my time in my kids and wife. Like, that's not wise and good either. But what happens is when we don't put God at the center, and you know, we only get so much time and space. I don't get to create more. So when the other category increases, naturally it either crowds out my relationship with God or with my wife or with my kids, because I don't get to create more space. I have a finite amount of time. I get the same time as everybody else. And so when I don't have that well balanced, that's when the other good things get crowded out. And now my calling to train up my kids and to love my wife like Christ loved the church, like, now those things aren't happening.
So it sounds like what we need to figure out is how to distribute the time Because I think I've heard it said that, but it's obvious when you hear it. The one thing that all of us have been given equally from God is time, because we all have the same number of hours in a day. So we've all been given that equally. How we use that time is a challenge, which gets out of whack sometimes. So how do we obviously we want God at the center. We want our relationship to God to be first and foremost, understanding who our true identity is in Him. How do we now work on the spread? I'm looking at this table in front of us because you said God is the center. It's like a spokes of a wheel. So I'm picturing it right here on this table. My wife, my kids, my job, baseball, free time, because Jesus went and rested. Resting time is even something that gets crowded out. Making sure we have good balance of rest, but also making sure it's not too much rest, that we're actually busy and doing the good things. I don't know what wisdom you got there. I'm speaking for myself. I can use some help in this area too. How do we start working on that?
Well, this is one of those do as I say, not as I always do type things, because again, I don't have it all figured out. And, there'll be days or weeks or months I look back and I'm like, boy, I didn't have that in line. And so again, practically speaking, you put God at the center, like never sacrificing your time with Him, and not only listening to Him in God's word, but then speaking to Him. And so I think always starting, the foundation has to be that relationship with Him. Mm-hmm. Listen to Him, speak to Him.
Yeah.
And then from there, my life and just the way I'm wired is like, I schedule my days. I schedule the meetings that I have. Work is scheduled. I know when my practices are. Like, as I reflect, like, why don't I bring that same intentionality and schedule to the time I invest, first with God, but with my wife, with my kids? Like, when you start to take that intentionality and setting some of that priority, you start to align on the things that are important. Like, I know it's so important that I date my wife weekly. Mm-hmm. And with 4 young kids, sometimes that's looks hard. Different.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's a walk. Sometimes that's hanging out after the kids go to bed. But that time and intentionality is huge for us. Same with the kids. Like, when I get the opportunity to invest intentional time, I've got 4, as we discussed. I can tell the way in which they're filled up when I get to do their thing, not just as a group, but I get to invest in them individually. But I have to be intentional in seeking that and scheduling that. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. And so it gets real practical for me, because I know myself and I know how I'm wired, that I'm a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. I think at times we all wrestle with that Messiah complex of like, well, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Yep. Mm-hmm. And so I think I know that I have to understand that it's okay to be bold and say no to a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm prioritizing those really important things. Mm-hmm. My kids, my God, my wife, like, and constantly assessing, like, are those things out of whack, and checking in to make sure that I'm loving them well.
Which we kind of talked about a little bit beforehand, but every yes usually comes with a no. You're saying no to something else. So maybe the first step is, whenever you do say yes to that thing from work, maybe you just have to say out loud, by doing that, I'm saying no to this, mm-hmm. and just start to see that that's maybe a step where things start to get out of whack. Because if you keep doing that, It's funny also hearing you talk. We just, on our previous podcast, we've had Dr. Brandon Steenbach on here talking about marriage and investing that time in your spouse. That's the most important relationship in your life. That's like top of the priority. Kids are right behind it. Mm-hmm. Kids shouldn't be in front of that. The marriage should be first, the kids second, and then work, and because you got to feed your family. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you might have to say yes to work and say no to your family, but are you also saying no to work and yes to your family? It's just a tension. It feels like it's just a tension.
It is.
There's just constant tension.
It's certainly a tension, and I think that's why we have to understand that life has seasons. Mm-hmm. And like, there's going to be a season where work is busy, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But when we stack those seasons, and that season becomes 2 or 4 or a year, and now it's starting to likely affect me physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's certainly affecting my relationships. So we have to understand that you can sprint for a season, you can't keep sprinting. Yeah. And I know what I do. You said it in my wife is good at reminding me of this, but a yes to this is a no to something else. And that's just the reality. Like, I think when these good things come my way, you use this table as a reference. Like, we only get so much of this time and space. Like, in the moment, I think I can expand it.
Yeah.
Because I just have my blinders on. Like, yeah, this is no big deal. I can do this. Yes. Like, it's not going to take that much time. So I underestimate the time. I underestimate the commitment. And all of a sudden, you get to that point, and all of a sudden, like, the responsibilities are a table this big, but I've only got a table this big. And so now I'm crowding things out because I don't always look through the lens of, like, inherently, if I say yes to doing this, I have to sacrifice and say no to an investment of time in something else. That's just reality.
It's incremental. It's just small little step by step. I know Pastor Mike has that book on Burnout that we've been talking through on our staff. Like, I think that was one of his main points, is you just saying yes to very small little things. Mm-hmm. You're saying yes to a lot of small little things, and pretty soon, whoops, you're burned out because you have no more space.
Yeah.
So how can, for all those people-pleasing guys out there, how do we say no? Maybe we just need to talk about that for a minute. Like, what does that look like to say no? Because the boss is going to call, and he's going to say, I need this. Mm-hmm. How do you tell your boss no?
Yeah.
I mean, you're one of the bosses around here at our church. How do I tell you no when you ask me, hey, can you get this done or help with that? Sorry, Nate. No, I can't.
Yeah. And just like that, the podcast was done because Jonathan's like, I can't do the podcast. Yeah.
You know what? Hey, it's our time's up.
It's time
I have other priorities that I need to,
you should.
So, let's talk about that. What does that look like? I don't know if there's a clear answer, but maybe for those guys that are out there struggling, and ladies too.
Yeah.
How can we do that? How do we do that?
Yeah, I'm going to steal this from one of Pastor Mike's recent sermons, but I am just, my instant reaction when somebody throws something my way is like, oh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I can do that. So we kind of touched on it, but I think that's so powerful what he said recently of, like, pause, think, pray. Because I think when you do that, not only personally, but then surrounded by others, getting feedback from, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's friends, but you pause, you assess what this is going to take, think about it, analyze it, pray about it. You're going to have a much better framework to make an informed decision on whether, yes, I can do this and it's not going to sacrifice time, relationship with my kids or wife or my God. And then I can make a good decision, say, yes, I can do this. Mm-hmm. Or you say, like, no, and that's such a hard thing, whether it's work or a volunteer opportunity, to say no. But again, I think I know that I have to get my mind out of this Messiah complex. Like, it has to be me.
Yeah.
If it's not me, then who else? Nobody else is going to do this. They can't. Like, they might not know how. Like, we have to take a step back and be like, I'm not Jesus.
Yeah.
He's already done it. Like, that's where you have to go back to your identity. Like, yeah, I might be letting you down, Jonathan, by saying no to that thing, but that's okay because I know what Jesus thinks of me.
Yeah.
And you have to rest on that.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty in that. When we know that, you can say no and be okay with it.
Yeah.
And there might be certain situations where it's like someone might get a little disappointed in that or might be frustrated by it. I think often we kind of overestimate that and think, like, oh, they're going to hate me.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to lose my job. Or, and again, I'm not advocating to say no to your boss all the time.
It's
a poor decision.
I listened to this podcast once where they just told me to say no to you.
Yeah, don't say that. Yeah. But I do think you can be bold to say no because you need to know what Jesus thinks of you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that is the most important relationship that you have. And that's the most important, significance that you're ever going to achieve and see. Like, knowing what those Bible verses say about what Jesus thinks of you, what the Father thinks of you. Like, you can rest knowing, like, yeah, I can be okay with saying no.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the different people that might be listening to this. It might be a scenario where we have to just take an honest look at the job we're currently in to say, no, this is part of the job and it is too much because I'm missing out on my family. Maybe the no that needs to be said is, maybe this job is not allowing me to have good balance, and I need to revisit that. And I also thought about the kids' sports question. I know you said your kids are in sports. I have a little bit of a pet peeve with that because I've heard many times, working in the church, it's kind of disappointing when you hear people that say, I can't come to church because my kids have sports games. That's just I just have a struggle with that. I mean, I understand that they're in a season of life. It's a season of life thing. There's this opportunity, but that to me, I've just seen so much of kids' sports culture take over our lives, driving halfway across the country for this event or that event. Maybe the no has to be like, okay, we're just going to do one local sport for these 2 months, and then we're going to stop. Sometimes I think we got to, I'm just talking out loud here, but sometimes the no is maybe not what we think it might need to be. But having that honest, take the blinders off, where is all of my time being dedicated, and is that healthy?
Yeah, you're hitting me right in the forehead again. As someone who's played sports my whole life, coached sports, have such an appreciation and enjoyment of that. And I think what you're hitting on there, though, is just the broader, we certainly have to assess what work looks like, and are we running at a pace that is not sustainable for our own good and the good of our relationships? Yeah. That has to be an assessment. Mm-hmm. I know, for me, where the breaking point often comes, it's not necessarily work, but it's work, and then I stack on this, and I stack on that, and I say yes to this. So yeah, it's sports and coaching, that's a component, and it's this extra volunteer thing, and it's this thing I want to go do, and so I think when you stack those things, we have to be better. I have to be better at looking at the bigger picture of things. So sports might be the thing. Yeah. I mean, it's unique to your situation, but I think we all have to look holistically at what our days and weeks look like. And again, as you take inventory, and I came from a manufacturing background, so I love a good time study, and not everybody's wired the same way with data.
I'm not wired that way, but I know.
I
get it. Yep.
But if you look at those things and you look at where your time is spent on all the things that you're just describing, and then I know I've done this, and then I look at how much time did I spend with God? How much time did I spend with my wife? How much intentional time did I get with my kids? That's when I think you have to start thinking real hard on do I need to say no to something, or do I need to say no to the next thing? Because this stuff is it's not a priority in my life right now, and the time shows that. Yeah.
My wife and I sometimes will look at our calendar and talk about when date night is, because we have this on that night, we have that on that night. And that I think is probably the practical piece is look at your calendar and just break apart into the pieces what you're doing. And it frustrates me when all of our nights get booked up with all good things, but that's sometimes a warning sign that we might need to step back. Pastor Mike mentioned this, his rhythm of the week, and you can help me remember. Sunday is church day, but then he said Monday was life, his life group, which is important, friend and church family time. Tuesday was, I think, something else he had. And then he had his rhythm. Friday night was mandatory date night. Saturday is family time, and then back to Sunday. So he had his blocked out days already established, which that's what I'm thinking. Just having those top priorities, making sure they get the calendar time first, and then make sure you have a rest day in there too, and then add in the things after that. So that might help say no. The no might be apparent at that point.
What are your non-negotiables? We are going to church. We are going to have a date night. We are going to have a devotion with our kids.
Yes.
Establishing those non-negotiables is so vital, because then that's going to drive your decision-making. It's going to drive the rhythms of your life. I think you're in a better position to understand when those rhythms of your life start to get out of whack, when you build in some of that intentionality. And again, there's seasons. I think we need to understand that there are seasons where it might look a little bit different, and that's okay. But again, we need to get back into that rhythm that is going to bless our own relationship with our Father and bless those that are around us.
Yeah.
And just as an aside too, I think of this, and I'm passionate about it because of my kids. And I want to model it for my kids. Like, I don't want my kids just to see the busyness I have in my life and like all the other things that are important, and not see the importance and the precedent that I set on my relationship with my God and how I love my wife and the devotion life that we have together as a family. And again, when I take a step back, like I feel guilt that because there are days where I'm not modeling that like I should. But that's such an important thing that, like, again, reframes like what I want my days to look like and the things that we do and what we're involved with, to make sure that we're putting an emphasis on those things, because I want my kids to see it.
Yeah. Man, so much good stuff here. Another thing that popped into my mind as we just recently had an episode 2 on loneliness and fighting for that time with friends. I kind of feel like we're talking, all the things we're talking about are all converging a little bit. But one of the points that Pastor Mike made was fighting for face-to-face time, which seems to fit right into this. Because what it sounded like is our friendships, we struggle with friendships in our modern culture. We're all so busy. We live far apart. But his point was we have to fight for that face-to-face time. What I hear him saying in this context is we have to determine what slice of the pie that gets. Because if we need to expand our friend time, we're going to be shrinking another time. And then there might be a season too where the sports season is up, so that's going to get a bigger piece. Maybe it's just awareness, just being aware of what's going on and not letting it get out of hand.
Yeah, you can't address something if you don't see it. So it takes awareness, it takes visibility. You know, you hit on something when I presented on this. I had this slide that I put up on the screen. I actually have it in front of me right now. But I put this slide up on the screen, and it was called Lessons from the Dark Side. It was like all the pitfalls and all the landmines that I found by doing this all wrong. And you started to touch on the friend piece, and that's such an important component, I know, for myself, because I think, and I'm speaking generally, but I think we as men, I know myself, like, we have this mentality of like, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. It's fine. I'm going to plow through. I'm going to get the project done. I'm going to, get through that event, or I'm going to do this, whatever it is. And just that mentality of like, I've got it. And we don't seek to surround ourselves and invest the intentional time with those in our lives who are going to point us to Jesus and what is right, or hold us accountable, call us out. Like, I'm so thankful to have men around me, friends around me, that I know that if I'm going down a path that is not godly, they're going to call me out. And I give you all permission to do that if you ever listen to this. But what does that take? It takes intentionality. Like, I have to build in time for that. I have to be honest, transparent with what my life looks like and the things, but that does take time.
Yeah.
So again, it takes intentionality to build into your rhythms that time so that you have those folks surrounded by you that can continue to let iron sharpen iron.
Yeah, I love, that's another point where that came up in another one of our episodes too, especially for us guys. I think having another guy in our life, like, that's like an accountability partner, and that can speak into your life and has the permission to call it out, and us as guys to be open and willing to receive that permission. So for just show a close confidant, a good friend, your schedule, and allow them to say, you know what, your kids' sports are taking up way too much of your time, and actually be able to receive that feedback and say, I'm going to really think about that. That's just so important, I think, for us guys. And I think a lot of guys are missing that. Yep. So maybe one first step for a lot of guys is get that guy. Ask, like, hey, would you be willing to be my accountability partner?
Yeah.
Take a look at my schedule. Pastor Michael had talked about having a trusted person to even look at your own finances and give feedback on that. It sounds like we can't do this alone. The community is so important. So
yeah, it certainly gets a little scary when you start to think about like having to be open and transparent like that. But again, the beauty of when you do that, and not only the love that you see through it from that trusted friend, that confident. Even I think of my wife and like just being open and honest about the struggles of the work needs and the volunteer needs, the board needs, and like my wife, my friends, like to be honest with them about that. Like, I'm in a coaching network right now, and what is a requirement of that? One, you build a plan for these things. Two, you share it. Yeah. Because it brings accountability. I share it with my wife. I share it with some close confidants, because one, they're going to love me when I get it wrong. Two, they're going to encourage me and say, hey, let's get this back in order.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, that's the beautiful thing about that relationship with God and the relationship with people that love God and point you to him is, I look at myself and I feel the guilt for getting these things wrong all too often, but the beauty of grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't have to look back on all the times I got it wrong. I get to look forward because there's grace. This wonderful Bible verse, again, as I presented on this, that I utilize, that was just such an encouragement to me as I think about all the times I've gotten this wrong, and I'll continue to get it wrong and get out of whack. But what is so beautiful, Philippians 3, verses 13 and 14, Apostle Paul talks about, he says, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. We win the goal. We have the prize because of Jesus. I don't have to look back at the things I didn't do and the ways that I failed because I've got Jesus in front of me. And then the beautiful thing, if you skip to verse 16, he says, only let us live up to what we have already attained. And so, but why do I try to continue to be better in my balance in life and how I love the people in my life and my relationship with God? It's not because I'm trying to earn or achieve something on my own. It's what I've already attained. And how have I attained that? It's the gift we talked about. How beautiful is that to know that I don't have to have guilt. I just get to look forward. Now, how do I continue to live out the godly example that Jesus has set in my life?
Yeah, I love that. When we mismanage our time, it may hurt someone. We may need to be forgiven of that. It may hurt our spouse. It may hurt our kids, our friends. But forgiveness, grace, and isn't this true of every aspect of life? Let's get back up and try again tomorrow. Yeah. I think the biggest thing I'm hearing is maybe sometimes we're not even really thinking about this. Maybe the blinders are still on we have our allocation of our time is just out of whack right now. There will be seasons, but maybe we just need to have a little self-evaluation, and where we see room for improvement, take some next steps to do that. Invite someone in to look at it and hold us accountable to it, and then get back up and try again tomorrow.
I've been, over the course of the last few months, just trying to be more intentional with this. And, if I could sum it up, I would say you got to take inventory of what it looks like in your life and have a plan. Yeah. Now, if you looked at my plan compared to my time study over the last weeks, months I've been doing this, it is imperfect. Yeah. So there is grace for that, and I rest on that. But I can certainly tell you that by having a plan, I have had more intentional time with my wife. I have had more intentional time in God's Word. I have sought more intentional time with each of my kids and playing hockey on the floor or playing that board game. Mm-hmm. And so it's certainly imperfect, and my plan is imperfect, and I fail at it often, too often than I'd like to admit. But I'm continuing to strive towards trying to live out that plan. And I have those accountability folks around me that look at the plan, they encourage me, they help track it, check in. My wife, same thing. We have shared goals on these things. So I think it's all those things that come together. That don't be afraid of the plan, because you will fail. Yeah. But it's so important to have one.
Yeah. Well, I know I have some homework to do now after this talk. So thank you. Thanks for that. I got some time I got to spend on this now. Well, thank you for imparting your wisdom on us. And if any one of you watching has some comments or thoughts, please leave them in the description or in the comments below. And we'd also love to hear your questions. You can submit those at the link in the description. So thank you. Thank you, Nate, for being here and joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Light Talks, and we will see you next time.